What is going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. With the scrimmages in the NBA bubble fully underway, I decided to take a look at 5 of the biggest dark horse teams in the bubble. There's been a lot of hype around the Bucks, the Lakers, and the Clippers, but some of the other teams definitely have a chance to make some noise if everything goes well. I wanted to make a video about some of the teams that can make noise in the playoff bubble this year, so I'm going to order this video from teams that I feel are the most underrated to teams with the most realistic chance of pulling off an upset. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Starting off the list, at number 5, we have the Portland Trail Blazers. Now, this season the Blazers were seriously injury riddled. Nurkic hasn't played since early last season, Zach Collins basically didn't play this year, they lost Rodney Hood to a torn Achilles, and then there were other guys that were in and out of the lineup. Because of all this, they dropped to the 9th seed in the West. The reason I'm picking this Blazers team as a dark horse team is mainly because they have the best player out of all the teams in the 8 to 13 range in the West. Lillard was on a tear earlier this season, averaging approximately 29 points per game with approximately 8 assists and 4 rebounds while consistently carrying his team on a nightly basis. Probably the biggest issue is going to be their schedule for the 8 bubble games. They need to either pass Memphis or stay less than 4 games outside of the 8th seed to make the play-in tournament, where they're still going to need to win 2 straight games to reach the playoffs. I'd say that's a pretty tall task to ask. Their schedule right now isn't looking too hot either. They've got some pretty tough teams to play against, particularly the Celtics, Rockets, and Clippers. With their injured players coming back though, they have enough to win these games. Their biggest obstacle might be the fact that the Pelicans have an easier schedule than them, and Memphis also probably has an easier schedule too, so they're battling 2 other strong teams just for the chance to get into the play-in tournament. If everything goes according to plan and Portland makes the playoffs, their best possible outcome for them would be a 6-game series with the Lakers in the first round. Dame, CJ, Melo, and Nurkic are a strong core, but LeBron in the playoffs is just a different animal. Anthony Davis is also playing amazingly well, and the supporting cast for the Lakers complement each other so well, I just don't see the Blazers having enough outside of their starters to really upset the Lakers. I put them at 5 only because they had a rough season, and their chances of upsetting the Lakers are just really tough, but they're definitely a sleeper when it comes to everyone seeming to put the focus on the Grizzlies and the Pelicans for the 8th seed. So for those many reasons, I'm putting the Blazers at number 5 on this list. Coming in at number 4, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder. A lot of people thought the Thunder weren't going to be a very good team this year because of all the moves and trades they made in the offseason, but they ended up proving everybody wrong. The Thunder actually went on to have a same record as the Houston Rockets this year, in a season where a lot of people didn't think they were going to win more than 30 or 35 games around there, and they were also top 10 in defensive rating as well. Looking at the Thunder's upcoming schedule in the bubble, they've got a pretty balanced mix of really good teams and a few okay teams. My prediction is that they're going to go 4-4 in these bubble games before the playoffs. I say they win against the Jazz, Suns, Wizards, and Grizzlies, but they lose to the Nuggets, Lakers, Heat, and Clippers. It could get interesting though if other teams decide to rest their stars for the last 2 or 3 games in the bubble, but for right now this is how I'm going to predict it turns out. Since the 3 to 7 seed in the West are within 4 games of each other, OKC could possibly get to the second round if they draw the right teams. The best matchup in my opinion for the Thunder would be the Jazz or the Mavericks. In a perfect world, if the Thunder did manage to get the 3rd seed or the 4th seed, I can see them making the second round after a really tough fought 7-game series in the first round. Most likely, they get bounced in the first round after putting up a strong fight against a higher seeded team. What I really want to see is OKC versus Houston. The storyline and the drama of that matchup would be so absolutely insane if they pulled off an upset against Houston. OKC getting even this far was a huge surprise, so anything they do in the playoffs will be deemed a successful season. I only put them 4th because they have the least realistic chance of advancing far in the playoffs of the top 6 teams in the West. But they exceeded expectations so far, so maybe they'll keep doing it. At number 3, we've got the Miami Heat. The Heat aren't too much of a dark horse candidate, but they seem to have flown under the radar a bit with so much attention on the Bucks, Raptors, and Celtics in the East. The Heat have been a very solid team this year, and they kinda got a bit underrated. They've put a talented core group of guys together, and their key pieces all bring different skill sets to the table. The Heat have a pretty good record of 41-24, and they're 6th in offensive rating as well. Taking a look at the Heat schedule, they have a pretty good mix of okay teams and good teams. Their toughest opponents are the Raptors, Bucks, and Celtics during this 8-game bubble. The Heat does have enough talent to win a lot of these games. Whether or not that actually happens though, we won't really know until it happens. I will say that they seem to have actually figured out how to defend Giannis Antetokounmpo on the Bucks, and they actually won 2 games against them this season. So I think they've shown that they can play at least and win against the very elite teams in the league like the Bucks and the Raptors and the Celtics. I feel as though this Heat team does have enough to pull off an upset if everything goes their way. Duncan Robinson has been shooting insanely well this year, and he's probably going to be even better in the bubble. Andre Iguodala looks more refreshed and ready to roll as a veteran playmaker and possibly a scorer if they need it. And then we've got the younger guys like Kendrick Nunn and Bam Adebayo that have been continuing to improve and get better. Right now the Heat are 4th in the East, and if they manage to do well in these last 8 games, they could rise up all the way to 3rd depending on how Boston does in their last 8 games. With Sabonis out for the Pacers and Oladipo being a huge question mark, I expect that the Heat should advance to the 2nd round at the very least. Their possible matchups if they're the 3rd seed would be Toronto in the 2nd round, which is a team that they won both games against so far this season. If they stay 4th, I could see them giving the Bucks a tough series in the 2nd round. I wouldn't expect Miami to win either of these matchups, but I do think they definitely have the potential to make things interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if Miami took either Milwaukee or Toronto to 7 games. This Heat team has the character, personnel, and coaching expertise to make a solid run in the playoffs this year. While they could be higher, I feel like there's 2 other really good teams on this list that are being heavily slept on. At number 2, we got the Houston Rockets. Over the past few years, the Rockets have always been right up there with the NBA's elite. Their usual reason for losing just happened to be the Golden State Warriors eliminating them. While that was a completely valid excuse, the Rockets don't have the Warriors in the way anymore, and this is their best shot at a title since 2018. I feel like the Rockets losing to the Warriors so much is one of the reasons they've become underrated. The attention in the West is solely on the Clippers and the Lakers, to the point where people are forgetting that Houston gave the Warriors with Kevin Durant the most trouble they had over their 3 years together. I know this version of the Houston Rockets is a little bit different, but they still have 2 of the last 3 MVPs on their team. Westbrook and Harden have seemed to have meshed really well together as Russ stopped taking threes and started focusing more on driving and playmaking. They also have a really solid bench with guys like Austin Rivers, Luke Richard Mbamute, Jeff Green, and Daniel House. Those guys are all pretty good offensive players, and they also sometimes can provide some defense when needed. Also, picking up Covington was a really good piece for Houston that added 3-and-D depth that they really needed. Before the lockdown, the Rockets were ironing out some kinks they had with their super small starting 5, but if they could figure out how to fully maximize that small ball unit, they can make a solid run at the title. They have the talent, a great coach, and a top-class general manager. If we take a glimpse at their 8-game schedule in the bubble, they actually have a pretty good schedule. They only really have to play the Bucks and the Lakers as the top-tier opponents. The rest of their games should favor Houston. They should realistically be able to get the 4 seed or the 3 seed in the West after these 8 games. My prediction for the Houston Rockets in the playoffs is a competitive 5 or 6 game series in the first round, and then a hard-fought second round. If they draw the Clippers in the second round, I seriously think that series could go 7 games, since I believe the Clippers are a better matchup for the Rockets than the Lakers are. I think the Lakers are just pretty big, and they have the size advantage over Houston, and it makes their small ball unit pretty tough to work with when they have to deal with Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, LeBron James, and so on. But I could see them taking a series with the Lakers depending on how it goes. I'd say this Rockets team has a floor of a second round exit, and their absolute ceiling is winning the championship in a perfect world. Realistically, I'd say a Western Conference Finals exit is more likely for the Rockets. Regardless, this Rockets team is talented, and they seem to be somewhat slept on by the media. At number 1, we got the reigning NBA champions, the Toronto Raptors. After the departure of Kawhi Leonard last season, it seemed like everyone started writing off the Raptors. Their title was seen as a carry job by Kawhi, and without him, they wouldn't win anything. It's safe to say the Raptors completely killed that narrative this year. Pascal Siakam emerged into an all-star and was in MVP talks at one point. Kyle Lowry continued to show why he is an all-star, and Nick Nurse proved that he's a coach that can maximize the talent of his players. Despite popular opinion, this Raptors team does have enough to make the NBA Finals. They are without a doubt the deepest team in the NBA. Powell, Van Fleet, Davis II, and Anunoby have all emerged as reliable scorers and solid defenders for their positions. The Raptors have had more than 5 players score 30 points in a game this season, which is a huge bonus during the playoffs. One of the biggest reasons this team was able to win the title last year was because of their depth. Even without a clear-cut superstar like Kawhi, this team can still make up for each other's weaknesses so well. If we look at their remaining schedule for the last 8 bubble games, the Raptors have a pretty hard schedule. They've got 5 teams who are in the top 4 of their respective conferences, so I'd say there's a chance that they fall to the 3rd seed in the East depending on how well the Celtics do. Heading into the playoffs, my expectation of the Raptors this year is a very competitive Eastern Conference Final Series with the Bucks. The second round matchup with Boston could honestly go either way, but no home court advantage makes that series very interesting. Both teams just match up really well, and they're both really good home teams, especially in the playoffs, so we're going to see how that dynamic changes going forward. As for the Bucks, Toronto seems to have adjusted well without Kawhi, and Siakam has improved as well as the rest of their younger guys. I don't expect them to win, but I think it's entirely possible that the Raptors could pull off an upset against Milwaukee and advance to the NBA Finals once again. Most likely though, Toronto takes the Bucks to 6 or 7 in the conference finals. At the end of the day, teams need superstars to win titles in the modern NBA, and if you don't have one, it's incredibly difficult to win a championship. Regardless, I think people are sleeping on the Raptors a lot, and they definitely have a chance to make the finals if everything goes absolutely perfect for them. Which team do you think has the biggest chance of upsetting this year? Comment your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed it. Turn on notifications, like the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.